One evening, on a sudden impulse, she had turned the corner of the Taggart Building for a last look at the office of John Galt, Incorporated, in the alley. She did not know what she wanted. Just to see it, she thought. A plank barrier had been raised along the sidewalk. The old building was being demolished. It had given up at last. She had climbed over the planks, and by the light of the street lamp that had once thrown a stranger shadow across the pavement, she had looked in through the window of her former office. Nothing was left of the ground floor. The partitions had been torn down. There were broken pipes hanging from the ceiling, and a pile of rubble on the floor. There was nothing to see. She had asked Reardon whether he had come there one night last spring and stood outside her window, fighting his desire to enter. But she had known even before he answered that he had not. She did not tell him why she asked it. She did not know why that memory still disturbed her at times. Beyond the window of her living room, the lighted rectangle of the calendar hung like a small shipping tag in the black sky. It read September 2nd. She smiled defiantly, remembering the race she had run against its changing pages. There were no deadlines now, she thought. No barriers, no threats, no limits. She heard a key turning in the door of her apartment. This was the sound she had waited for, had wanted to hear tonight. Reardon came in, as he had come many times, using the key she had given him, as sole announcement. He threw his hat and coat down on a chair with a gesture that had become familiar. He wore the formal black of dinner clothes. "Hello," she said. "I'm still waiting for the evening when I won't find you in," he answered. "Then you'll have to phone the offices of Taggart Transcontinental." "Any evening?" "Nowhere else?" "Jealous, Hank?" "No." "Curious what it would feel like to be." He stood looking at her across the room, refusing to let himself approach her, deliberately prolonging the pleasure of knowing that he could do it whenever he wished. She wore the tight gray skirt of an office suit, and a blouse of transparent white cloth tailored like a man's shirt. The blouse flared out above her waistline, stressing the trim flatness of her hips. Against the glow of a lamp behind her, he could see the slender silhouette of her body within the flaring circle of the blouse. "How was the banquet?" she asked. "Fine. I escaped as soon as I could." "Why didn't you come? You were invited?" "I didn't want to see you in public." He glanced at her, as if stressing that he noted the full meaning of her answer. Then the lines of his face moved to the hint of an amused smile. "You missed a lot. The National Council of Metal Industries won't put itself again through the ordeal of having me for guest of honor. Not if they can help it." "What happened?" "Nothing. Just a lot of speeches." "Was it an ordeal for you?" "No." "Yes, in a way. I'd really wanted to enjoy it." "Shall I get you a drink?" "Yes, will you?" She turned to go. He stopped her, grasping her shoulders from behind. He bent her head back and kissed her mouth. When he raised his head, she pulled it down again with a demanding gesture of ownership, as if stressing her right to do it. Then she stepped away from him. "Never mind the drink," he said. "I didn't really want it, except for seeing you wait on me." "Well, then let me wait on you." "No." He smiled, stretching himself out on the couch, his hands crossed under his head. He felt at home. It was the first home he had ever found. "You know the worst part of the banquet was that the only wish of every person present was to get it over with," he said. "What I can't understand is why they wanted to do it at all. They didn't have to. Certainly not for my sake." She picked up a cigarette box, extended it to him, then held the flame of a lighter to the tip of his cigarette in the deliberate manner of waiting on him. She smiled in answer to his chuckle, then sat down on the arm of a chair across the room. "Why did you accept their invitation, Hank?" she asked. "You've always refused to join them." "I didn't want to refuse a peace offer, when I've beaten them and they know it. I'll never join them, but an invitation to appear as a guest of honor. Well, I thought they were good losers. I thought it was generous of them." "Of them?" "Are you going to say, of me?" "Hank, after all the things they've done to stop you." I won, didn't I? So I thought. You know, I didn't hold it against them that they couldn't see the value of the metal sooner, so long as they saw it at last. Every man learns in his own way in time. Sure, I know there was a lot of cowardice there, and envy and hypocrisy, but I thought that was only the surface. Now, when I've proved my case, when I've proved it so loudly, I thought their real motive for inviting me was their appreciation of the metal. And... She smiled in the brief space of his pause. She knew the sentence he had stopped himself from uttering. And for that I would forgive anyone anything. But it wasn't, he said. And I couldn't figure out what their motive was, Dagny. I don't think they had any motive at all. They didn't give that banquet to please me, or to gain something from me, or to save face with the public. There was no purpose of any kind about it. No meaning. They didn't really care when they denounced the metal, and they don't care now. They're not really afraid that I'll drive them all off the market. They don't care enough even about that. Do you know what that banquet was like? It's as if they'd heard that there are values one is supposed to honor, and this is what one does to honor them. So they went through the motions, like ghosts pulled by some sort of distant echoes from a better age. I couldn't stand it, she said, her face tight. And you don't think you're generous? He glanced up at her. His eyes brightened to a look of amusement. Why do they make you so angry? She said, her voice low to hide the sound of tenderness. You wanted to enjoy it. It probably serves me right. I shouldn't have expected anything. I don't know what it was that I wanted. I do. I've never liked occasions of that sort. I don't see why I expected it to be different this time. You know, I went there feeling almost as if the metal had changed everything, even people. Oh, yes, Hank, I know. Well, it was the wrong place to seek anything. Do you remember? You said once that celebrations should be only for those who have something to celebrate. The dot of her lighted cigarette stopped in midair. She sat still. She had never spoken to him of that party or of anything related to his home. In a moment she answered quietly, I remember. I know what you meant. I knew it then, too. He was looking straight at her. She lowered her eyes. He remained silent. When he spoke again, his voice was gay. The worst thing about people is not the insults they hand out, but the compliments. I couldn't bear the kind they spouted tonight, particularly when they kept saying how much everybody needs me. They, the city, the country, and the whole world, I guess. Apparently their idea of the height of glory is to deal with people who need them. I can't stand people who need me. He glanced at her. Do you need me? She answered, her voice earnest. Desperately. He laughed. No, not the way I meant. You didn't say it the way they do. How did I say it? Like a trader who pays for what he wants. They say it like beggars who use a tin cup as a claim check. I pay for it, Hank? Don't look innocent. You know exactly what I mean. Yes, she whispered. She was smiling. Oh, to hell with them, he said happily, stretching his legs, shifting the position of his body on the couch, stressing the luxury of relaxation. I'm no good as a public figure. Anyway, it doesn't matter now. We don't have to care what they see or don't see. They'll leave us alone. It's clear track ahead. What's the next undertaking, Mr. Vice President? A transcontinental track of Reardon metal. How soon do you want it? Tomorrow morning. 3 years from now is when I'll get it. Think you can do it in 3 years? If the if the Rio Norte line does as well as it's doing now, it's going to do better. That's only the beginning. I have an installment plan made out. As the money comes in, I'm going to start tearing up the main track 1 division at a time, and replacing it with Reardon metal rail. Okay. Any time you wish to start. I'll keep moving the old rail to the branch lines. They won't last much longer, if I don't. In 3 years, you'll ride on your own metal into San Francisco, if somebody wants to give you a banquet there. In 3 years, I'll have mills pouring Reardon metal in Colorado, in Michigan, and in Idaho. That's my installment plan.
Your own mills? Branches?
Uh-huh.